Welcome everyone to Clarity 16.4.0 Feature Supportability Training. This is Denise Saladay. The topic that I'll be covering is reporting administration. What's new this release? What's new this release for administration under reporting? First, users will now have the capability to import and export data providers and reports. Next, customers will be able to purge their report output items in the new reports library via a new job in Classic. We also renamed the existing purge report job so that users won't get confused that this only applies to Jaspersoft reports. Next, when users are deleting report schedules, they'll get a new confirmation message that'll state that their report instances that are associated to the report schedule will also be deleted. And next, reports can now be deleted in the reports library, and this will apply to any exports that users create as well as the scheduled report output. We also have the details flyout available in the available reports grid. And we made some enhancements to instantaneous sync and made a minor UX change to the hint in Classic for the setting under Include SQL Curve Data. Be aware that the exporting and importing of data providers and reports that is now available in Release 16.4.0 is released in beta. Demonstration. I'll show you how to export and import data providers. We'll also take a look at how to import and export the reports with or without their data providers. Then we'll view purging report instances in the report library as well as deleting report instances manually in the reports library. And last, we'll access the details flyout that's now available in the Available Reports tab. To export or import data providers or reports, users must enable that action in administration in the Actions tile. You can see each capability has its own action. We have an export and import for report and another one for data provider, and those actions are enabled. Other than that, you don't need any other rights to perform these operations. Users can export one or more data providers in the data provider grid, and they'll have an action button to do so. Only non-system published data providers will have that button enabled. So if I click on this one, you can see the export button appears, but it's disabled because this doesn't have a migration key, which is the other thing that is required. And this value can be updated manually for any data providers that you want to export. And you would just manually populate it like I did here for this data provider. And for system data providers, note that the migration key does not allow updates. This migration key has to be unique in the data provider grid. And now that I have this populated for this non-system published data provider, you can see that the export button is active. It's important to note that you can only export a maximum of up to 30 data providers at a time. And the export package will not include studio or lookup definitions, so you have to migrate those in Clarity prior to importing. So let's export these two data providers. Once it's finished, the status banner will disappear and you'll now have a notification that your data provider export is complete. And to download your export package, you just click on the download link and it'll create your file. Users will also see a notification in Classic that their export completed. This is the export package that was created whenever I downloaded it. And if we look at its contents, it includes the JSON file of the data providers as well as a file which describes what was included here and what type of file it was that was created. To import those two data providers into a different Clarity environment, I'll need to navigate to that environment to the data provider grid, and I'll have an action here for import. Now it's important to note that this action will only appear if the logged in user has data provider create rights. So we'll select import and select the package that was created during the prior export. You can see that it's updating and the import is in progress. And once it finishes, you'll get a notification that it completed. And we can see those two data providers if we sort this grid by the migration key. These are the only two that had a migration key. And here they are, and notice that they're automatically published. This release, we only support data provider creation, not replace or merge. And if I had report files included in this export package, it would be blocked here in the grid. You'd have to go to the reports grid to import that. And both your target and source server have to be on the same Clarity version. And the limitation is that the import process doesn't validate any queries that you might have in your data provider. So you have to make sure that they're going to work on your target server after import. And the notification that I received that it was successful is here. You can click on it to see that 2 items were successfully processed. And if there were any errors or warnings or failures, that you would also get a notification with that information. And you'll also have an alert in Classic under notifications. And this is the notification that was generated. Some common errors that you may see while importing data providers are if the Clarity version of both the target and the source server aren't the same, you'll get an error. Or if your migration key of an exported data provider matches the target server data provider migration key, it also will not be imported. Let's try and import the same package again, which also has the same migration key, just to generate an error. You can see that this import was complete, so the process completed, but you'll also note that under my notifications that this data provider import was unsuccessful. And if you click on it, you can see that it failed because there was already data providers with the same migration key, and you can see both of the migration keys on the data provider. Now, depending on the type of import error you get, your data provider could either be rolled back or created in a draft state. In this case, it was rolled back. Best practices after you successfully import data providers is you should verify that the data providers you imported are in published state. You can see that 2 data providers are. And if you had any queries within this data provider, you should test those separately, because again, they're not validated during the process. And last, you can test these data providers by opening up the data provider and navigating into the preview tab. You can just select data elements here and perform some testing here. The only place that users can export and import reports is within the Report Designer grid. You can only export non-system published reports. And if you have any drill down reports or sub-reports within your report that you're exporting, it will also be included within your export package. Within the Report Designer grid, there's a new button called Export. And right now it's disabled because in order to export, you need to have a migration key. You can only populate the migration key attribute for non-system reports, and that value must be unique for each report within the grid. And it's not required for drill down or sub-reports because those will automatically be included in your report package. But you do need to make sure that any data providers in your main report, your sub-reports, and your drill down reports have the migration key populated so that those can be exported as well. You can export up to a maximum limit of 10 reports at once, and you can do that with or without their data providers. So we will export this one, and you can see now that the export button is active since I have my migration key populated. And this is where you can select whether you want to extract and export just the report design only or the report design and its data providers. And in this example, I'm going to select the report design and its data providers, but you need to make sure that those data providers also have a migration key applied. And once the export completes, you'll receive a bell notification. Now there are a few limitations. Whenever you're exporting, the package will not include any studio or lookup definitions, so you need to migrate those prior to importing to your new environment. Additionally, any image widget definitions will get exported, but not the actual image itself. So designers will need to manually upload the image for the widget definition on the target server after they import the zip package. Now we'll take a look at the bell notification. It says this report export was complete. And if you click on it, it will actually download the file. You can also view your alert in Classic under Notifications for this export. And this here, Reports Export, is the package that was generated from my export. And if we open it, note that it includes the reports that were exported in a JSON format, as well as the data providers in the same JSON format, because that's what I selected. And under the manifest, you can see details of the file that was generated. To import my report export package, I can select under Actions, Import. Now that option will only appear if the user has Report Designer create rights. We'll select the package that I downloaded and the import completed. Only report and data provider creation is supported, not replace or merge. And your Clarity version of the target environment has to be the same version as your source environment. And the limitation is the import process does not validate queries in the data provider, so you need to test them and make sure that they work on your target server. Users will receive an alert, which you can see in your bell. The import completed, and if you click on it, you can see details that there were 4 items that were processed, which includes the report and its 3 data providers in this example. You can also see your notification alert in Classic for your import. Users will still receive a notification if the import completed with warnings, errors, or it failed. And you could see my imported report here, IT capacity and demand. It was imported in draft state, and it has the same migration key as the source environment. Recall that my report originally that I exported was in published state, and all report imports are draft state. And if we navigate over to data providers to view the data providers that were imported as part of this package, these 3 here, you can see that they are in published state and they have the same migration key as the source environment. And if you have a migration key of an exported report that matches the target server migration key that already exists, the report will not be imported. And that also will apply to data providers. So to demonstrate that, let's import the package again so that we can view the error state. So the process completed, and if we look under our notifications, you can see the report import was unsuccessful because in this target environment, data providers already exist with these 3 migration keys and the same for the report. If your clarity versions were different between your export and import environments, you would also see a similar message. And depending on your import error, the report and their data providers will either be rolled back, created in draft state, which would also apply to the data providers. Best practices while importing reports are you want to verify that all the reports that were included in your package, as well as their data providers, were imported into your target environment and they are the correct state. You'll want to validate and test all queries that are included in any of your data providers, and you can use the data provider preview tab to test that data. You can also test your report and your data provider data in the data provider preview tab. And you can test all imported reports, and whenever you're done testing, you'll need to publish your report. The export of data providers and reports is handled by the content export job, and you can view that in Classic. So you navigate into jobs, and if you click on this run, you can actually see the details here for the processing to help you troubleshoot any problems that you may have. Importing data providers and reports is handled by the content import job, and you can view that in Classic under jobs. So to troubleshoot this, if you just go into the log details here, you can see that this one here is showing the errors that we saw in the export process, that these migration keys already existed because we tried to import the report and its data providers again in the same environment when they already existed. We have a new job that's available in Classic, which will allow administrators to purge reports in the new reports library. This new job is called Purge Reports. Now, the old job, we renamed the description and the name to include the word Jaspersoft so that it's clear and users will know that the original job permanently deletes Jaspersoft report output, while the new job will delete items in the reports library. And these jobs are very similar. You can see that you can choose a format of specific output that you want to delete. You can browse for specific one or more reports. These are multi-selects that you want to delete output for. And again, these are multi-select as well. You can select a from run date or a to run date for date ranges for reports that you want to delete, and you also have an option to select a run by, where you can choose reports that are run by a certain person or group to purge the reports for. And whenever you run this job, it permanently deletes this report for all users who have access to that report output. And we're not evaluating security during the runtime of this job. We added a new confirmation when users are deleting report schedules. The behavior is the same this release as it was last release, besides this new confirmation message that you'll get. So you can see here that if you delete your schedule, the message will state that any associated report instances generated from this report schedule will also be deleted. And you can just click delete if you decide to continue with that operation. And any report instances from the KPI report were deleted here in the reports library, as expected. Beginning with this release, users can now delete report output in the reports library. And they can do that either using a delete button or a right-click action. You'll be able to delete any reports which were generated by report schedules or any exported reports that were done. But this will only be available for report schedule owners or the users who actually requested the export of a report. They will automatically be able to delete their reports here in their library. Any scheduled report output that was shared with other users will also be deleted. But users cannot delete report output that's scheduled by other users or report exports that are generated by other users. The Details flyout is now available in the Reports tile under the Available Reports tab. We highlight an item. You can see those details. In Classic System Options, we made a minor UX change to the hint on both settings for Include SQL Curve data and Enable Instantaneous Sync for the data warehouse. We added the note that the full load data warehouse job must be run in certain situations. And while that requirement has not changed from last release, we just wanted administrators to be aware of that before they were changing any of these settings here. In the data warehouse table, DWH config settings, we added a new column called Is Sync in Debug Mode, which is set to 0 by default. When this is set to 1, entries will be generated in the logs to help debug the instantaneous sync processing. And this concludes the supportability training for the topic Reporting Administration. Thank you.